Hello guys, you're welcome to another Scratch project with Flourishfield Academy. And today we're going to be building a project that many of us know or at some point have already played on mobile before. But we're going to be doing that today using Scratch. And the game is the Subway Surfers. And in process of building this, we'll be learning a lot of new concepts in building this game. First, let us take a look at what we are gonna build. We start the game by clicking on the green flag and try to get points like the regular Subway Surfers game by moving from left to right, dodging different things as they appear along the line. And you move from left to right using the arrow keys. And you can also try to jump. Let me show us that. You can jump by using the up arrow key, or you can go down using the down arrow key. Now, we're going to try to learn how to build this in this video. We're going to break it in parts. So we'll break the video into 3 parts, and this is going to be the first part of this video. And now, let us head into the project properly. So I'm just going to get to Scratch and click on Create to create a new project. And the first thing I'd like to do is I like to get all my sprites and all my backdrops ready at first, so that I don't have to worry about them later on in the project. And yeah, let's take out the sprite. There we go. Now, some of the backdrops and the sprites that we need for this project are not available in Scratch. They're not available in Scratch. So we have to download. I have to download them from the internet, royalty free, to use them in this project. I will be putting a link to the images in the description below. And first, let's try to get our backdrop. I have it here. Okay, I'm going to add my backdrop. I'll go to this button that says choose a backdrop, and I'll select upload. I have it on my desktop called Subway. Yeah, there we go. So here's the stage. Now I've added the stage. As you can see, it's beginning to look already like what we had earlier. Now it's time to move on to adding the sprites. So to do that, I'll do the same. And again, some of the sprites are not available in Scratch. I have to download them as images to use them in this project. So here's what we need to do. I'll go again to upload. Remember, we're going to share the link to the sprites and the images in the description. So I'm going to add this for my player sprite. As you can see, I'm going to do the same for the other ones. I'm also going to add the train sprite, which is very important. And finally, I'm going to add the logo for the Subway Surfers. I also had to download this from the internet. All right. Let me place it properly. Now, I believe we can start with the codes for our game. And I like to start from the easier ones first. So let's take care of the logo for the Subway Surfers. So remember, whenever we want to start our game in Scratch, we always use the green flag. Although we can use other events, but the green flag is one of the most common events used to start our game in Scratch. So I'm going to go to events, and I'll bring the when green flag clicked. Now I want to make sure I no longer see the Subway Surfer logo on my screen for now when the green flag is clicked. So when green flag clicked, I will look for the button that helps me hide. When green flag clicked, hide. And if I test that out, we get to see that immediately I click on the green flag, I no longer see the Subway Surfers game for now. Now, let's move on to writing code for the other sprites as well as the background. Now, to do that again, we need to create some variables. Now, variables are store of data. They help us store data in Scratch and, of course, every other programming language. So we need to store some data like the coin and life for our player. And let's create these variables. So I'll go to variables, make a variable, and I'm going to call this life. And I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to call that coin. I'm going to call that coin. Let's see. Now, at first, we need to make sure that the life variable is 1, while the coin variable remains at 0. The coin variable is only going to get increased as we progress. So to do that, we can write that code on any of the sprites we currently have. But because the other sprites are going to contain a lot more codes, so let's do that on the backdrop. So on the backdrop, I'll go to events and I'll add when green flag clicked. I'll look for variables and I'll set the coin variable to 0 as we expect. And at the same time, we need to set the life variable to 1. Set life to 1. There we go. Now we can begin to code the player. Now it's important to note that the player sprite has a lot of other costumes and they are properly labeled. Let's see them. We can see about 14 other costumes. Stand and a lot of walks. And when you get to costume number 8, it begins to roll. So we need to pay attention to that as well. Don't worry, we're going to use that in our code. I just wanted to bring our attention to that. Now, the first thing we want to do is when green flag clicked, of course, we want to set life to 1. Remember that? We want to make sure we set our life variable to 1. Okay, that's the life of the player has been set to 1 now. And we need to make sure we do a few things. Remember, there's going to be collision with the player and some of the trains when we start building them. So the next thing we must do is to make sure we push the player to the front layer. So we need to look for the block that says go to front layer. Okay, where is that? I need to look for the go to block. Okay. No, this isn't it. Okay. Yep, here we go. Go to front layer. There we go. And after that, we also need to make sure that when we start our game, the player maintains a specific start position. For me, the X position has to be 0 so that it maintains this exact position. So I'll go to motion and set X to 0. I'll look for that and I'll set X to 0. And if I test out my code now, you see nothing happens yet, but now my player is in the front layer, and even if I move this out and I click on the flag, you can see X position is always gonna be 0. Now that we've done that, one more thing we have to do is make sure that we get the right costume at first for our player. So we also want to go to looks is switch our costume to standing. Okay, we want to make sure, let me put it here. We need to switch our costume to stand. Remember, I showed us that we have a lot of costumes here, but we need to keep an eye on what happens from roll down. Okay, we need to keep an eye on what happens from roll down. We're gonna see why I said that just in a bit. Now, having done that, let us move on to writing codes for making sure that our player even moves in the first place, at least moves his body. Now, to do that, I'm gonna need a new when green flag clicked. Let me try to create space because we got a lot of codes to write. I'm gonna put that here. And because the movement of our player in the Subway Surf happens every single time, then we need a forever loop. I'll bring that in here. I'll bring that in here. Now, there are a few things we need to pay attention to. Now, the type of movement for our Subway Surf depends on if it is standing or if it is down. Now, remember, we're going to be trying to dodge some of the trains and hurdles that appear on the screen. So you either go up to dodge the hurdle or train, or you go down to dodge the hurdle or train, depending on the scenario that appears while the game is running. So we also need variables to cater for that. So I'm going to create two extra variables. First variable, I'm going to call it bounce for it to, which means when the player goes up, I'm going to call that bounce. I'm going to create another one. What do we call it now? I'll call it sit down, which means when the player has gone down. Now we're going to do something. When the player is bouncing, we'll give it a value of 1. And if it is not bouncing, which means if it's not up, we're going to give it a value of 0. Same thing for when the player is down. If the player goes down, we give it a value of 1. And if the player is not down, maybe standing or even bouncing, he has a value of 0. Now let's continue to write in the code. Now we need, since we have two possible scenarios, either the bounce is 1 or 0, and the sitting down is 1 or 0. We need a conditional to help us check for those conditions. After which, then the player continues moving. So I'm gonna go to control to look for conditions. I'm gonna need the if then else because I want to also continue moving if nothing happens. So first, I'll put the if then here. Then I'll go to operators and I'll check if sit down is 1. Okay, I'll bring the equal to operator in and I'll go to variables and I'll check if sit down is 1, which means if it is sitting down. Then if it is, then I want to switch my costume to roll. Roll means to go back. If you take a look at the costumes for the player, let's look for roll. There has to be one called roll. If you take a look at that, you notice it's crouching. So I'll go back to the code. Now I'll go back to the code. Now I'll switch my costume to roll. Let's look for roll. Okay. And I'll wait for 1 second. And then I'll take sit down back to 0. Then I'll change set. Sit down back to 0. Now, I've basically taken care of what happens when it's sitting down. But I still need to do other parts of the code. Now, let us also take care of the other condition, bounce. Remember, we've just finished taking care of when the sprite crouches. We call that sit down. Now, let's also take care of when bounce is equal to 1. And here's what we have to do. We need another if-else condition, because if bounce is not equal to 1 and sit down is also not equal to 1, we want the movement of the sprite, which in this case the player, to continue. So to do that, I need another if-else condition. I'll put that in the else block of the first one. Now, I'll go right back to the operator and look for an equal to sign, the equal to operator, because I want to check if bounce, the variable bounce, is equal to 1, just like I did for sit down. Okay, drag it in, and I say if bounce is equal to 1. Now, if bounce is equal to 1, we want to change our costumes. Again, remember we have a costume that, let's see, I think that should be dead 1. There you go. Now, if bounce is equal to 1, I think we need to switch it to this costume that makes the player look like it's jumping, and it's called dead 1. So we'll, in our code, we'll look for the block that says switch costume to dead 1. Okay, yes, here we go. Switch costume to dead 1, because dead 1 makes it look like it's jumping. And so that it actually has the jump effect and actually moves up, we need to change y. Y refers to the motion upwards, while x refers to the motion sideways. So I'll add the block that says change y by 10. Now I'll drag that in, change y by 10. I need to wait for 1 second so that everything doesn't happen in a flash. I need to wait for 1 second and then bring it right back down. So this time I'll change y by -10. You guessed right. I'll change y by -10. Let me make this -10, -10, so that it comes right back down. And again, I'll have to set bounds right back to 0. Let me take it up so you can see my code. I'll set bounds right back to 0. Now, let's test out our code. Nothing. Again, you don't notice much, except it's still standing. But at this point, we want our sprite to at least be moving. So I'll stop that. And instead, we need to make sure we have other costumes represented. Stand, walk 1, walk 2, walk 3, and the likes. So let's do that. Now we do that in the else block of this if then statement, the second one. So let me try to move here. So what I'm going to do now is add switch costume to stand. Let's look for that. Switch costume to stand. And I'm going to add the wait 1 second. Maybe let's wait for a shorter time. Let's wait for a shorter time. Say 0.5 seconds. 0.5. I'll just duplicate this. I'll put it here. Now, I want to switch costume to stand. To stand. for 0.5 seconds, and I'll move it to walk 1, and I'll do the same again. I'll duplicate, and I'll do that for walk 2. I'll duplicate again. I'm gonna have to do that about 6 times. I think we have 6 different walk costumes, so I'm gonna do this for walk 3. I'll do it again, duplicate. I'll do it for walk 4. And I'll duplicate again for walk 5. And finally, the last one for walk 6. Here you go. Now let's test out our code. Now at this point, we should begin to notice that our player moves. Now let's test out our code. Let's see. Do you notice? It's moving, but a little too slowly. So let's reduce the wait time further. I think 0.5 is still too much. Let's reduce it further. Let's make it 0.1 and test it out again. I'll make this 0.1. 0.1. I'll make this 0.1 as well. Basically, everything has to be 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and finally 0.1. Now, let us test out the game again. Let's see if we get a better feel to the movement of our player. Wow. Can you see? The player is already giving us that moving simulation. Next, we begin to talk about how to write the codes for it to move, at least move from this part to the next and this part to the next. And we're going to be doing that in the next part of our Easter Premiere Series video. And stay tuned on this channel. Just like and subscribe to the channel, and so that you'll be the first to get notified when the next video drops. And see you soon.